Like many other popular Roblox games, Juke's Towers of Hell has had quite a bit of controversy over the last 7 years. Whether it was the community, the staff, or events, there's almost always something for people to yell about. However, the recent Legacy event has become a new hotspot for people who seethe on the internet. Due to it feeling rushed, unpolished, and just poorly made, many players have brushed it off as another failed product from the JToH devs. But what really made it bad? To understand why the event had such a bad reputation even from the start, we need to look at the overall structuring and format of the event. First of all, it was started with the promise of lasting at least until the game hit 100 million visits, which would probably be a few weeks from then. Along with the Legacy event also came a sort of sub-event called the 100 million celebration. It features 4 mini-towers ranging from easy difficulty to peak extreme, but we'll come back to that. Similar to last year's Legacy event, there is a new place where you could beat the current towers within it to get visits, and when a new visit milestone is reached, the 2018 version of Ring 1 would update, which usually introduced 1 to 2 new towers and sometimes even a new lobby. In the current version of Ring 1 is where the 100 million celebration stayed. The only time it got updated was to add the 4th mini-tower, and that was really it. Now that we have the general overview out of the way, it begs the question, was it the event itself that people hated, or the gameplay within it? The towers are obviously the make or break of anything like this. Even if there's an amazing lobby and story, if the gameplay sucks, then that's all people are going to remember it by. For this one, there's actually a lot of content here. After the event was fully updated and finished, there was a total of 13 new towers added between the old Ring 1 and 2, along with the 4 mini-towers. They range from borderline unplayable to actually pretty decent. Starting off with our only easy tower, we have a complete Tower of Anger clone. Seriously, if I showed you a grayed out version of this tower, you cannot tell me there's a noticeable difference unless you've memorized the entire tower like a crazy person. It takes about 10 minutes to beat this if you don't somehow fall, and 8 minutes of it is probably just walking. And the best part is that 9 floors of the tower are Wii Shop Bling. Your reward for beating this masterpiece of a tower is a completely useless holdable swinging platform. Fun. Similar to the first tower, this one is just Tower of Madness with more colors. Luckily there's actual music to listen to so you don't go completely insane. There is literally nothing to say about this one. It's just Tower of Madness in an alternate universe. How do I even make a script out of this? The reward for this is apparently a square bumper. As of writing this, it hasn't been released yet, but it sounds like some sort of portable jump pad. I don't know though. Now that we're out of the beginner-friendly difficulties, the gameplay can actually be pretty fun. Because originality is for losers, this one is based off of an old tower called Tower of Misfortune that used custom client objects. There's an old version of memory platforms, laser cannons, and crushing platforms like in Tower of Yore. There's also fire kill bricks, which were never used in the towers, but they basically just slowly do damage until you can find water to cool down. The gameplay is fun, and it's the first tower I played, which I had quite a bit of fun with. Again, I wrote this video before the event ended, so all I know is that the reward is called a laser cannon. No idea what this one does. I'm honestly surprised this name hasn't already been used, but I guess JToH's already broken keyboards, phones, laptops, screens, tables, dreams, boats, and my will to live, so I really can't complain. Like every other tower, this one is a copy of Impossible Expectations with a little bit of original gameplay mixed in. Since it's peak challenging, and also it's a legacy tower, it has a floor 10 outside. This is going to be a recurring theme for these old school towers, so I hope you have good nerve control. The reward is actually one of the best in the event, giving a pretty powerful healing item. Why did they think adding this tower into an event was a good idea? Yeah, let's add one of the most hated towers in the game into a limited time event and then just slightly nerf it. This tower is horrible to play, and the entire difficulty comes from floors 1 and 3. After that, it's basically low intense gameplay with some random insane jumps just to annoy you slightly more. I actually spent 2 hours playing this garbage can of a tower just to end up dying in the kill brick pit on floor 10 because in old versions of the game they damaged you really fast for some reason. The reward for beating this is just a cosmetic, which is only obtainable through beating this tower, so if you're a collector like I am, then have fun. Okay, we're finally done with Ring 1. And a great start for Ring 2 with another copy tower. This one is just phone snapping, but with less design and slightly less polished gameplay. This is also the first tower we'll see which has the final stretch syndrome. A really long and unnecessary final outside that will most likely send you back to floor 1. According to the wiki, the reward is going to be either an aura or a trail. I don't really know what to say about these obvious copies anymore. It's hard to talk about these legacy event towers because since they're so bland, there's nothing interesting to say about them. Like Tower of Window Shattering, this wasn't obviously based on anything, but it was just a really simple tower with nothing special at all. I can't even remember anything about this tower besides that floor 10 is really long and that it has a funny trap at the end. Again, the reward is an unreleased cosmetic, so that's it. Tower of Gloom was originally called Tower of Glee for a little bit, but they changed it back, probably because nothing about this tower is gleeful. The colors are dark and muted, the gameplay is boring, and it also has Final Stretch Syndrome, but it's not that long this time. The reward is actually pretty cool though. It's a nerfed version of the Slammo healing item you get for beating Window Shattering, but if you beat both that and this tower, then you can get a buffed version of it. Pretty interesting, but not enough to make this tower one of the most forgettable in the entire event. Right at release, this one was immediately hated, and for good reason. The main difficulty of this tower comes from unmarked conveyors, wobbly parts, and worst of all, so many falling platforms. If the platform isn't connected to anything, there's a 90% chance it falls. This also has Final Stretch Syndrome, with the longest outside so far, and there's unpredictable falling platforms on the outside too. It also has what I like to call swinging soft lock syndrome. This is when a swinging platform can rotate to the side, making it impossible to jump on it if you fall and try getting back up. This tower sucks, you get a weird coil from beating it, and I don't want to see it ever again. Similar to the last one, this was kinda hated on release, but I don't really see why. Yeah, the last 4 floors definitely spike in difficulty, but it's a peak intense classic tower. Did you expect any better? The tower is creative, it uses transparent blocks to make a weird darkness section on floor 5, and the gameplay is actually really fun. Unfortunately, this tower does have Final Stretch Syndrome, stretching out vertically instead of wrapping around the frame. My only real issue with it is that it has SSS on floor 7 outside, but other than that, this was really fun to play. Reward is an unknown cosmetic as usual. I need to get through these faster or else this video is going to be way too long. This tower is tightrope and rat-based gameplay, and the main issue is that it spikes a lot on the last few floors. The first 5 floors are low remorseless at the highest, and by the last 2 floors, some people argue that a lot of the jumps are insane difficulty. I ended up not beating this one after failing on floor 9 twice. It wasn't fun to replay the really easy floors over and over just to fail and do it all again, especially since all you get is a death effect that I probably won't even use. This is the hardest tower I actually did, and lots of people argue that it was one of the best in the event. Ironically, this was made by Gamator as an example of what not to do as a classic tower, but it ended up turning out really good. The gameplay is fun and never gets repetitive, and even though it has FSS, it feels like it should actually be there instead of it being forced in for the sake of being classic like the other ones. To top it all off, the reward is really good, being a nice trail that I'm actually currently using. We have another soul-crushing trap tower. Obviously, I didn't even try to do this as most of its difficulty comes from memorizing the conveyors and invisible blocks. It looks pretty decent, but the gameplay is so bad that I didn't even want to play it for background footage. The reward is another letter, this being Z. Doing this for a lighting letter seems really unnecessary, especially when you could buy something almost identical for just 30 tickets. Finally, we're out of the classic themed Purgatory. These are the easiest of the 4 mini towers, and they're both exactly what you'd expect for something like this. The gameplay is oddly complicated for easy difficulty, but since it's less than a minute long, it's allowed to be harder without raising the difficulty. Basic mini towers, very forgettable. This is where the famous controversy begins. This tower stands at mid-intense, but the gameplay can get as hard as high remorseless, and it's so cramped that it's genuinely annoying to sight read. Just to make it worse, they also added a timed outside using a mechanic that's only used for this part, and there's no explanation for what the object does at all. So if you can't figure it out within 3 seconds, you have to replay the entire tower. A lot of people argue it should be remorseless difficulty, but since it's so short, it's placed way lower than the actual difficulty of the gameplay. But don't worry, it gets worse! After this one came out, people just forgot about the last one, specifically to hate on this mini tower. This is the most controversial part of the event, and it's the main reason for why many people consider this event a failure. This tower was originally added at low extreme. Immediately, people argued for it to be raised, as the gameplay was around high catastrophic. For the next few days, there were tons of difficulty changes and really rushed to nerfs, and even after that, it ended up at peak extreme with mid-catastrophic gameplay. This tower takes everything bad about 100 Milli Finale. The cramped gameplay, the confusing mechanics, the punishing aspects, and multiplies it by 100. It's so tight that you can barely see where you're going, there are a ton of weird mechanics that barely make any sense, and there are insta-kills scattered everywhere. They're on top of every platform, every little obstacle, everywhere you look is an insta-kill. And you know what you get for beating this abomination? A death effect. You get a death effect that isn't even released, so we don't even know what it looks like. Seriously? This is getting out of hand. I think it's pretty obvious as to why people hated this event so much. Almost every tower feels really rushed, or it's just a complete rip-off of another tower, or it's just plain bad. Speaking of the towers, here's every tower in the Legacy event ranked from worst to best. Unfortunately, I didn't actually enjoy any of these towers except maybe the top 3. But I don't think the main reason the event is hated so much is the towers. What's really the problem here? Well, personally, I think it's just the theme of the event. Theming a limited time celebration on old, unpolished towers really isn't a great idea. It feels like the gameplay is purposely bad when they could have done so much better. The idea is cool, but it's so hard to implement without the towers becoming boring and repetitive like most towers are. And to add on to that, I think a lot of people felt forced to play it, especially since there are so many cosmetics and items that are locked behind it. It felt more like a boring badge hunt than an actual fun event. It's also hard to even find the right time to play the event since it was constantly updating with the visits counter. For reference, this is how the visits counter worked. I'm not going to go over it all, pause to read it if you want. Since it was always updating, it was hard to find a good time to play for a while without the server shutting down and you losing all your progress, just to add a new tower that you don't care about. To make this even worse, the entire thing was hosted by just one person, and they had to manually update it every time a visit milestone was reached. This meant that if he was sleeping or he wasn't available, the sign would be permanently stuck saying that the server would be updating shortly. It always felt like a risk to try to play because you had the constant possibility of it updating and getting kicked from the server. Luckily, there was a 2-week period where it was done updating, but it was still annoying when the event was still building itself. I can't say this event wasn't overhated though. Although I don't think it was a good event at all, people made it out to be some horrible experience that wasn't ever fun in the slightest, and I just don't think that's true. It was supposed to be a nostalgic experience, and it did that, but it just didn't go far enough to make it actually good. GameMater has confirmed that this will probably be the last of the Legacy events, and while I can't say I'm disappointed at all, I'm at least glad we got it for a little bit. But me ranting about it doesn't fix anything. How could it be better? Well, the first main issue that could be fixed was that the gameplay simply wasn't good. This would definitely be hard to change, but I think they should have added towers of the same general quality as Forgotten Ridge's towers are. They're classic feeling without sacrificing what makes the game actually fun to play in the first place. It might not fit in such an old lobby, but it's better than what we have now, and I think it's well worth it to add much better towers at the cost of losing a little bit of realism. My main solution to fixing this doesn't come from the theme of the event, or the event itself, but actually from the rewards you get from it. The rewards are not enough to justify how much effort you have to put in to get them. They're either a useless item or a cosmetic that 99.9% of people won't even use. The only items that serve a purpose are the healing item and the coil from Tower of Tearing Up. A simple fix would just be to add more items that have a use. While this is good in concept, coding unique items for all 17 towers would definitely take a while, and the devs already have enough to deal with. My solution is to make event towers give something that lots of people will actually use: tickets. Think about it. If you want to get tickets for an expensive item in the shop, then you could grind it out and buy whatever you want. Instead of each tower giving you one specific item that you're not going to use, they can give you a currency that you can spend on anything you want. If you decide that you don't want to do the event, then that's okay too, because tickets are always able to be collected through the weekly challenges anyway, so you're not missing out if you choose not to do it. It would give motivation to people who care, but if you don't need the tickets, then you don't need to get them because they aren't event exclusive. If the JTo devs want to take it even further, imagine this: a new event exclusive currency that can be used to buy special items. By special, I don't mean cosmetics or boost items, but actually unique things. They could be things like an option to customize the color of your username in chat, or be able to equip multiple cosmetics of the same type. Or if this is possible, even something where you could make your own custom trail. Imagine it like the Geometry Dash particle editor, but for a JTo trail. The shop could be open at all times, so you're never actually missing out on exclusive stuff because there are always more events in the future. They could be a really unique way to have an incentive to play it, and like tickets, you can choose what you want. It might be hard to code stuff like this, but it would be so cool to have your own custom trail or a colorful name in the chat for everyone to see. I think the main issue with the current item reward system is that when the event ends, you're never going to be able to get those items again. For ticket shop items, you could always save up the tickets for it, but if you don't beat 100 mil revenge, you're never going to get that death effect. It would give me, and probably many others, an actual reason to care about this sort of stuff. But that's just my opinion. It depends on what you want. If you love having a time limit on playing a horrible mini tower for a cosmetic, then you're crazy. But that's just your preference. My ticket idea was the best thing I could come up with that would probably appeal to the majority of JToH players. It's different for everyone though. In my opinion, this event was not a failure, but it could have been so much better. That's all I have to say. Good night, everyone.